Well, good evening. I am going to pray before I begin. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings. We are grateful for all that you have done and that you continue to do. And we thank you for this opportunity here in Perth. And Lord, I am insufficient for anything of value. But Lord, you have the words of life. And so we invite you to be here. We know that you are because you have promised where two or three are gathered in your name, there you are also. And so, Lord, thank you for being here. And Lord, speak to us this evening and open our eyes to the things that we need to know that we might truly be free. And this I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. It's my pleasure to be here with you. My wife is here as well somewhere. Oh, there she is in the back. She was waving, so just wave. That's my wife, Lieta. And it's nice to be able to travel with her when we're in the United States and we're within driving distance. Usually most of the family will go. When it's flying, I usually go with a child, and this time I got to go with my wife. And so we left 6 children behind from the ages of 20 to 6. So yes, they're kind of getting a little bit anxious for mommy and daddy to get back home. To be honest, they're pretty anxious for mommy to get back home because she's the one that keeps everything going. And now the 20-year-old is figuring out how hard it is for mommy to keep everything going. But anyways, it's a pleasure to be here. We had the privilege of spending the 3 weeks in New Zealand, in Hamilton, Christchurch, and Auckland, and that was our original plans. And then Sydney, actually Wollongong, which is just south of Sydney, said, "Can you please come here?" And so we added that. And then Perth said, "Can you come here?" And I don't know. But okay, well, we could squeeze it into 3 evenings during the week, and then we could come and be here. And so it's a privilege to actually, to be here and to be on this side of the world and to meet you. And soon we are all going to be family. We were already, but now we're going to figure out that we are family. And so that's good. My background is that I am a medical doctor, and I trained at Loma Linda University. And I was thinking doing family practice until I did my first clinical rotation, which was trauma surgery. And I fell in love with it. And I said, oh, I want to do trauma. But to do trauma surgery, you have to do general surgery, which is in the United States 5 years of residency training after medical school. And then you have to do 2 years of fellowship in trauma. And then you belong to the hospital. And you can't be very far from the hospital on a pager all the time. And if it goes off, you've got to get there and so on. And my wife said, well, why don't you try emergency medicine? And so I did, and I fell in love with that too. And so I ended up becoming an ER doctor. And so I had, it was exciting, and it was, interesting. You get to take care of people with gunshot wounds and car accidents and other types of traumas, injuries, acute issues that are going on, and so on. And then I've always been interested in mission work and missions since I was little, and I wanted to be a missionary doctor as well. And so we went off to the mission field to an island in the Caribbean. And while we were there, I became the director of emergency medicine and family practice. And so now, instead of just having emergency patients, now I had family practice patients who were coming to me, and now I'm treating, now more long-term hypertension and high cholesterol and obesity and these diabetes and the normal, conditions that you would think of in a family practice setting, which I was not trained for. And in an emergency department setting, you see a patient once and that's it, unless they're slightly less than fortunate. the second car accident or the second time the person shot them, or other things of that nature. Usually you see them once and then that's it. But in family practice, they keep coming back. And what I found out is that they kept coming back with the same problems, and they had the same issues. And so, and I'm giving them, they have diabetes, and so I'm giving them metformin. And we start with 500 milligrams and then come back 6 months later and the diabetes is worse. And so let's add it to, let's make it 1,000 milligrams, and then it's still worse, and then let's add to it, and so on. And now we have to add glyburide and other things on top of that as well. You can have high blood pressure, and so let's give you one medication and that's not working, increase the dose, and then that's not working, and and add to it, and so on. And so this is what we were taught to do, and that's what I did. And it took me a little while to figure out this isn't working. Right? It's just not working. And I went into medicine so I could help people, and I didn't feel like I was really helping people because I wasn't actually fixing the underlying issue that was going on. And then I started getting myself into trouble. And how I got myself into trouble is I started reading. And I read this wonderful book, The Ministry of Healing. And I read Medical Ministry, and I read Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, and I read Counsels on Diet and Foods, and I read a number of different things, and I realized, hey, there is a blueprint for health. Wow, this is really exciting. I was excited. There's a blueprint. And in that blueprint, I realized that I should educate. But my practice was complaint, diagnosis, prescription, complaint, diagnosis, prescription. And it was the power of the pen, At least in emergency, you get to do procedures and you get to sew people up, or you get to, cut open a few things and do some, minor surgical procedures. But in family practice, it's just the power of the pen, And so I realized I needed to educate my patients. And so I started educating them in regards to, first of all, I had to learn. There was a radio program or radio station that began, and they wanted health programming, and they came to our hospital so that we would provide health programming for their radio station. And I became one of the first guinea pigs for actually teaching people over the radio. I've never done that before. It scared me to death, but they wanted me to. I was the missionary, and so the missionary should speak. And so I was thinking, well, I can't teach them about reducing a shoulder dislocation, or how do you suture a laceration, or how do you stabilize somebody from, anaphylactic shock or other things of that nature on the radio. That's, you just can't teach those things over the radio. So what am I going to teach? And I realized, all right, well, I should probably teach about health. And then I had a big aha moment. I don't know anything about health. Right? That was my aha moment. I'd gone, I'd been through all of my training and so on, and through medical school and through, specialty training and all that kind of stuff. And I'm in practice and I'm taking care of patients. And I finally realized I don't know anything about health. I know about sickness. I know about disease. I know about trauma. I know about acute care and so on and so forth, but I don't know about health. And so that began a personal journey for me of now studying about health and how to be healthy. And it was because of this radio program, and I had to put together material in order to teach on the radio. And so I had to study the material in order to know it so that I could teach it on the radio program. And so now I started pursuing things kind of in a different direction. And I was like, whoa, this is exciting. You can actually reverse diabetes, and you can help hypertension without having to have medication and so on. For the most part, and these different things. And so I started putting together materials for my patients, and I started teaching them, and I'd get done teaching them, and they'd be like, and where's my prescription? I had one patient, he had diabetes, new onset type 2 diabetes, and I was telling him all the things that he could do to reverse his diabetes, but here's your prescription for your medication, and let's schedule another appointment in 3 months or something and check and see how things are going. And he came back in 3 months and his numbers were great. It was excellent. And I was like, oh, this is really good. Things are working for you. And he said, I didn't take any of your medicine. I said, you didn't? I didn't take any of your medicine. I just did what you told me. Yeah, I love you. I'm so happy with you. You actually did what I told you, and it worked. Wow, that's exciting, right? Oh, I love, it was great. Somebody actually reversed their diabetes without, taking the medication, and they were just, doing lifestyle stuff and whatever. And so I was finally like, okay, I have got to switch my career, which was really, it was not an easy decision because I was still in debt, and medicine pays a lot, but lifestyle does not pay a lot. And so I ended up going to Uchee Pines Institute, and it looks a little bit different nowadays than it did in the past. So this is the Lifestyle Center at Uchee Pines Institute, and so I went there to learn from Dr. Agatha Thrash. And she was, one of the leading physicians in natural remedies and non-drug therapies and other things like that. And so I went to learn from her so that I could know how to take care of patients with lifestyle and natural remedies and so on and get them off their medications. And I went there so that I could be there for a year and then go and do something else. And Dr. Agatha said, well, Dr. Mark, any specialty is at least 3 years. And this is kind of like a specialty. And you need to consider staying here at least 3 years so that you can learn what you need to learn before you go on and so on. And I said, okay, yeah, that seemed to be reasonable. And so I said, okay, yeah, 3 years. And then 3 years was up, and I was thinking, okay, what are we going to do next? And I did one of those things like pray and say, okay, God. And sometimes when you pray and you go, okay, God, well, He does things. And I said, okay, God, if you want me to stay here, then have the board ask me to do something specific, in relation to it. And if they don't, then that means that you want me to be somewhere else. That board meeting, the president resigned. And he pointed across the table and he said, and I think he would be the good replacement. I did not go here for administration. I came here to learn. I was going to school. And all of a sudden I was the principal. And so I became the president of Uchee Pines, and shortly after that, the medical director left. Not because I became the president, but the medical director was going off to the mission field, and so on. And so then I became the medical director, and so now I was the medical director and the president. And then the conference office came to me, and they said, "We need a health ministries director." Okay, so I said, let me pray about it, and I got to talk to the board about that, see if they're okay. I got to talk to my wife about it, see if she's okay, and everybody was okay. And so then I was the health ministry director for the conference, and the president of Uchee Pines, and the health ministries director, and the health ministries director, and the president, and the medical director here, and then it was traveling and speaking and other things of that nature. Well, while I was at Uchee, it was interesting. It was really good. Anybody here a physician? Okay, so we got one. Did I see a hand over here? No, okay. We are bred to be skeptical. We are. I mean, we're bred to be skeptical. And so when I went to Uchee Pines, and we had patients that normally we would be treating in the hospital on the ward, or maybe even ICU, well, not that case, but, they had some fairly significant conditions. I was there, and I was like, oh, they should not be in the lifestyle center. They should be in the hospital. And Dr. Agatha was like, all right, Dr. Mark, it's okay. Just watch and wait. You'll see. I was watching. I was waiting. I mean, and I was really nervous about some of the individuals that are there, and things did not happen as fast as in the hospital, because in the hospital things happen pretty fast. But when it comes to lifestyle and other things like that, it doesn't happen as fast. But things began to turn around, and people started turning the corner, and they started actually doing better and getting better. And I was surprised by the time 2.5 weeks are over, and how well people are doing by the time they're going home. I was like, all right, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I knew that I needed to do this, but I'm really surprised at how well it's actually working, right? And it took me a little while longer before I really kind of settled into it, and kind of became more and more comfortable managing people from that standpoint. But mind you, I still sent people to the hospital, right? I still sent them to the hospital when they needed to go, right? And sometimes that was the case. People will say, "Oh yeah, I got stage 2 cancer." And they come in and they're, and no, it's stage 4, and and they've got all sorts of problems, and it's you look at them and you go, "No, you need to go to the hospital." Right? It's not proper for us to take care of you here. And so, coming from critical care and coming from family practice and coming from lifestyle and so on and so forth, I appreciate the benefits of all of them. The conventional system does diagnostics really well. It does acute care really well. It does surgical care really well. It does those things. You know what it does not do really well? Chronic non-communicable diseases, right? It does not do diabetes well. It does not do hypertension well. It does not do high cholesterol well. It does not do those things well. And so, praise God, there's lifestyle centers that do those things well. But I tell people, if I get in a car accident, don't take me to Uchee Pines. Take me to the hospital, right? Because they do that well, right? Well, while I was there at Uchee Pines, something began to dawn on me, and that was people have a lifestyle for a reason. They have a lifestyle for a reason. And you know where you find the reason for their lifestyle? In the mind, right? You find the reason for the lifestyle in the mind. So somebody eats what they eat because of what they think. And somebody does what they do because of what they think. It comes from the thinking. And so I realized that, I'm a slow learner. It took me a while to figure these things out, but then I began to figure it out. And so then I began to work with my patients, and try to understand what's going on in the mind. Why is a person thinking the way that they do? And then it started getting really interesting because Michelle came. And Michelle was one of the patients that I had. Now, this is not her, and Michelle is not her name, but she was a patient that I had, and she had stage 3C ovarian cancer. And so she had 11 tumors in her abdominal cavity, including the original tumor in the ovary. And she had been through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, and each time she went through chemotherapy, the tumors were larger and more in number. And then they were suggesting that she be a part of a clinical trial to try out a different regimen of chemotherapeutic agents and to see if it actually has any effectiveness or not. And she decided that, no, I'm done. She had been an athlete and a coach and so on, and now she could hardly walk, and she was really weak, and she didn't tolerate it very well. And so she went online and she found our lifestyle center. And so she said, all right, I'm going to go there. And she did. And I was her doctor. And so we did the normal stuff that we do. We put her on a whole food, plant-based diet, and we got her out exercising. It's called walking, right? And fresh air, sunshine, hydrotherapy, like we boiled her. It's called hyperthermia. There's a number of benefits associated with hyperthermia, which is not flies. Flies are not the benefits of hyperthermia. But it increases natural killer cell and cytotoxic T lymphocytes in the tumor. If you have solid tumors, it decreases angiogenesis or blood flow to the tumor itself for up to 96 hours after hyperthermic experience. One of the largest studies of spontaneous remissions of cancer, looking at what are common factors amongst those spontaneous remissions, all of them included fever, right? Some kind of hyperthermic experience that an individual had, and so on. So that that's part of what we used, and then some herbs that are known to have some benefit, but so we did all that kind of stuff. But I also got her story. And her story was a bit, of a story. She never knew her father. Never. Her lineage had come from the Caribbean, and her father had moved off to England after, before she was ever born. And then her mother was kind of a party girl, and she was into this, that, and the other thing. And as a little one, Michelle was kind of a drag on her mom's party life. And so by the time she was 8, her mom shipped her off to the grandparents, that was a good move because grandparents were stable. And so the grandparents raised her, and now she called grandma mom, and she called granddad dad. So now they're like her parents, but her mom would come back into the picture every once in a while, and she would just, her chaos would be there, and she was now jealous. The mom was jealous of the relationship that Michelle had with her grandparents, which she called parents, and she was not going to call that woman mom. And so there was a lot of tension, and there was a lot of bitterness, and this happened over and over throughout the years. And I knew that bitterness was not going to help her in the process of her healing. And so we talked about the need for forgiveness, and we talked about the need for her to be able to love her mother, right? And that there's only one source of love, and that is God, and she needs to come to God and take the love and ask him for the love so that she can have the love so that she can love her mother with. And love does not control her. Love allows her to be however she is, but loves her anyways. And, well, she was desperate, she's got stage 3C cancer, and so what is this going to hurt? So every day she spends time alone with God, asking him to give her love so that she can love her mother with, and so that she can have God as her source, and she can let her mother be alone, and mom can be whatever mom is, and that's okay. Right? Well, at the end of 2.5 weeks, her cancer markers are back down in the normal range. She's feeling wonderful. She's gotten to the point where she can walk and then jog for a little bit and then walk and then jog for a little bit, and her energy is coming back, and she's just praising God, hallelujah. 2 months later, repeat scan shows that she has 5 tumors of the 11 remaining. And all of the 5 that are remaining are smaller than what they had been previously. So clearly, something's working, but you have so many variables, you don't know what's working. Right? Is it the boiling? Is it the herbs? Is it the diet? Is it the exercise? Is it the, the mental side of things and whatever? Well, another 2 months go along, and so now she's 4 months out, and boo-hoo-hoo, cancer markers are back up. And so, I talked with her, and guess what? Guess what happened? She's still doing the diet, she's still doing the exercise, she's still doing the hydrotherapy, she's still taking the herbs, she's still doing all that other kind of stuff, but mom came back in the picture again. And her and mom, and so she went, that's technical terminology, right? And so she's back in the resentment and the bitterness and so on in relation to mother. And so I, counseled with her again. You need God, you don't need your mother. You need a source that's good, and God is good. Your mother's not good. But you need to take love from God so that you can love your mother with, because God created you to love. Right? To be loved and to love. And if you can't love, that's not going to help you. It can only harm you if you cannot love. And so, so she got back on the horse and so on. And the next phone call, guess what? Cancer markers back down, right? So in her case, it was a kind of a seminal case in my mind, because it showed me clearly in her case, her disease process was tracking with what was going on in her mind, right? And so that was kind of a new thought to me. I hadn't really thought of things from that standpoint. And yes, she was doing better. And of course we can ask ourselves the question, was it all just in her head? Well, no, she had very real cancer going on in her body. Right? But in her case, the resentment against her mother and so on was the foundation of the issue. And when that was being resolved, then the cancer started going away. Right? All right. What do we call them? Reggie. We'll call him Reggie. Reggie, he came to Uchee Pines. Actually, he wasn't one of the patients. His wife was. And she was going through the session. I was giving one of the lectures the day that he was there visiting, and he enjoyed the lecture, and so we had a little discussion afterwards. And they ended up buying my book, The Law of Life, that I had written just before that. And they took it home and they put it on the shelf. And it sat there for 4 months, right? And after 4 months, they decided, well, we should probably maybe read this. You know, we got it, so we should read it. And they started doing so, and they're like, oh, whoa, all right, this is good stuff. And so they started a book club, and going week by week, chapter by chapter through the book, and then COVID hit, and so they switched to a virtual book club. And so they did the book club once, and then they did the book club twice, and then they did the book club 3 times. And when they were doing it the 3rd time, it struck him while he was going through one of the chapters that there was some unresolved issues between him and a coworker that had occurred a number of years before, and that he needed to bring that to the cross and to experience freedom from his past with Jesus taking his place and so on, and then to go to the coworker and to apologize for his involvement, his role in the disgruntled nature of what happened, and so on. And what he had been struggling with for the last 3 years was ulcerative colitis. And if you know ulcerative colitis, it's an autoimmune disease, and the condition begins in the colon. So the immune system starts attacking the lining of the colon, and it starts at the latter part of the colon, and then it starts in the rectum, and then it starts working its way up, and so on and so forth, and it'll eventually work its way through the entire colon. And then after it does so, you're at an extreme risk of having colon cancer. It's uncomfortable. There's all sorts of bad symptoms associated with it. And, you can try some lifestyle changes, and that's great. Then there's steroids, there's biologics, other, medications in order to try to decrease the immune system's activity in relation to, the damage that it's doing to the colon. And if none of that is working, then the last resort is cut out the colon, right? So if you don't have a colon, then the immune system can't attack it, right? And then you're not going to develop colon cancer if you don't have a colon, right? And so he had tried the natural remedies, he had tried lifestyle, it wasn't working. He had gone to some of the lighter medications, and now he was on the heavier medications, and it was somewhat controlled, but it really wasn't getting better. But guess what happened when he resolved the issue with his coworker? It's gone. It's gone. The ulcerative colitis is gone. And he and I are, I'm not using his real name, but he and I are good friends now, and it's still gone. Right? It's still gone. So it highlights that there are issues of the mind, and those issues of the mind can have a strong impact upon what's going on in the body. Right? It can have a very strong impact. And we are told that sickness of the mind prevails where? Everywhere, right? So that means you don't have to look to the left or the right or to in front of you or behind you. Sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here. So we're going to be exploring this idea, this topic through the next few days so that we understand, okay, well, what's going on and what's the underlying issue behind it, right? So that we can experience healing in ways that maybe we had not thought of before. Right? Have you ever met anybody that was a health ministries director that lived the health message and got cancer? I've taken care of them. Yeah. 20 years vegan, exercising 5 days a week, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. Great, you go down and you check all the new start, everything, and it's like beautiful, 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 beautiful. And they've got cancer, right? Or they developed an autoimmune condition or other things like that. I just heard a couple days ago of another one, and they're so ashamed. They have quit their position. They don't want anybody to know because they've been abdicating health and they've been advocating, these different things, and now they're sick. And how can they advocate health when they're sick? So what's going on there? If you have somebody that has a really good lifestyle, but they still end up getting sick, well, we might say, well, it's dumb luck. Well, we might say that, but luck implies chance. And chance implies that there's no cause. And the Bible says the curse causeless shall not come. So there's always a cause. Question is, do we know what it is, and do we know where to look when it comes to that? So here's a tree, and when you walk up to a tree, what is it that you notice first? Yeah, maybe the leaves, the shape of the tree. If it's fruit season, maybe the fruits on it, whatever. So what happened? All right. So let's say that you got some bad fruit and bad leaves on the tree, and okay. So is the bad fruit and the bad leaves the problem? No. Okay. Well. Okay. Why not? All right. So the problem is deeper than that. So what if I just pluck off the bad fruit and the bad leaves? Have I fixed the problem? No. Now it can help, right? You decrease the disease burden, and so I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but it doesn't get deep enough. It doesn't really fix the problem. Now the bad fruit and the bad leaves are symptoms, right? So you have pain, you have got coughing, itching, sore throat, runny nose, other things of that nature. And it's obvious. Symptoms are obvious, right? When you've got pain, you know you got pain, right? When you're coughing, you know you're coughing. You might tune it out for a little while, but then you get back to it, and you know you've got it. And what do we do for symptoms? All right, so if you're coughing, you take cough medicine. If you're itching, you take an itching pill. You got pain, you take pain medicine, and so on. So there's a pill for every ill. No, there's many pills for every ill, right? And it could be a pharmaceutical pill, or it could be a nutraceutical pill, or an herbaceutical. It's not a real name, but anyways, whatever you throw in the pill, whether it came from a pharmacy or whether it came from somebody's farm or whether it came from whatever you throw in there, there's a pill for every ill. You can go to the pharmacy and find, there's a whole bunch of selections, but you can go to the health food store and it's got as many selections, right? And so, yes, all right, that's, is it good that we have something to treat symptoms? Yes, sure it is. Let's say that you got pain. You got pain right here between your shoulder blades. It is just, it's sharp and stabbing. It came on suddenly, and oh man, it's really painful, and you can't lay on your back, and then pain gets worse at night. You were trying to push through during the day, but now nighttime is here, and you can't lay on your back, and you can't sleep, and you're finally like, I'm going to the emergency department. And you go to the emergency department, but unfortunately there was a huge accident piled up and whatever, and there's all sorts of traumas all over the place, and they just have somebody triaging out in the waiting room, and you walk in, back pain, and they say, okay, back pain here, get prescription medication, you go fill it and see your primary care doctor tomorrow, and so you go fill it and you take it, and it takes some of the pain away, still can't lay on your back, it's still painful, and so on. And so tomorrow you go see your doctor, and your doctor does an exam. You find out there's a reason why you have back pain. You weren't watching your spouse well enough. Right? So, did the pill take care of the problem? Right? The problem was a knife in your back, right? Did the pill take care of the problem? No. But are you glad that you have a pill when you have a knife in your back? Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm glad that there's pain medication to help with pain, when you cut your finger off or you do other things of that nature. But it just doesn't fix the problem, right? It doesn't fix the problem because the problem is deeper than that. Now, your symptoms are like the fire alarm. Is a fire alarm a problem? No. Does your fire alarm indicate that there is a problem? Yes. But is the fire alarm part of the problem or part of the solution? It's part of the solution. The problem is the fire. So what happens if you have a fire going on, the fire alarm goes off, now you've got symptoms that are there, pain, coughing, itching, and so on, and what you do is you can't sleep because of the fire alarm, so you get a pillow and you stick it over the fire alarm. And now instead of, now it's, and now you can go back to sleep. Oh no, but you're holding that, so you need some duct tape. So you tape it down and you go back to sleep. If you get burned up, whose fault is it? Yeah, it's your own. Because you had a warning telling you something was wrong and you turned the warning off, right? And it's okay to have stuff for symptoms, but what we do is we take it and now we turn off looking for the cause, right? We stop looking for the cause. We go, okay, well, if this will take care of the symptoms, then okay, but we're not looking for the cause. That's a problem. All right, do the fruit and the leaves grow by themselves? No, what do they grow off of? Branches. The branches. And the branches represent our behaviors, right? It's the breathing, the drinking, and the eating, and so on. So I went from a practice that primarily focused on symptom care. Then I switched to a lifestyle center where then I was dealing with behaviors. So now we're going to talk about what you eat and when you eat and how you eat it and how many times you chew before you eat it and, all of these different things. And okay, we're talking about behavior. Okay, we're getting deeper. But is it deep enough? No, it's not. It's not deep enough, right? And that's what I found out after a while. It's not deep enough because the branches don't grow by themselves. What do they grow on? The trunk. And the trunk represents our needs, right? You need oxygen, you need water, you need food. Can you change what you need? No. Can you, like today, decide, all right, I'm not going to need oxygen today. All right? You'll be convinced pretty soon that whatever you think, you cannot change what you need, right? You need what you need because you are what you are. And you can't change what you are, therefore you cannot change what you need. Can I say that again? You cannot change what you are. Therefore, you cannot change what you need. Or we can turn it around the other way and we can say you cannot change what you need, therefore you cannot change what you are. So you need oxygen, but where does the oxygen come from that you need? Does it come from inside of you or does it come from outside of you? No, it comes from outside of you. And what's going to happen if it stays outside of you? Yeah, you're going to die, right? So I don't care if the oxygen is close to you. It could be right there at your nose, but if it stays outside, you're going to die. What's the only way you're going to live? If it comes in, and then it becomes a part of you, right? Only when it comes in and it becomes a part of you can you live by it. And you need water, but if the water stays right at your lips, you're going to die. The only way that you're going to live is when it comes in and then it becomes a part of you, right? So everything you need comes from outside of you, but if it stays outside of you, you die. It must come inside in order for you to live by those things that you need. And so you need oxygen, therefore you breathe. You need water, therefore you drink. You need food, therefore you eat. So the behaviors are there to supply what you need. Right? That's why we have the behaviors. It's there to supply what you need. Because what's the oxygen going to do on its own? Well, let's go have a party in his lungs. Right? No. Oxygen's not going to blow down, it's not going to blow into you. You got to breathe. And the water's not just going to squirt down your throat. You got to drink it. And you need food, and the food's not just going to crawl down your throat, hopefully. You got to eat it. And everything first takes what it needs, but then it gives from what it took. And something else takes of that and then gives. And something else takes of that and gives, and so on. Right? You take food in certain forms, right? But you give something in another form. And something else eats that and loves it. And then gives something else. And something else comes along and gives that something and takes that something else and eats it and then gives along. And everything takes and gives and takes and gives. How big would you be if you kept every bite of food you ever ate? We wouldn't make it in the back door. Right? You only keep a little bit. And eventually that you're going to give away too. So everything takes and everything gives. All right? Now, does the trunk grow by itself? No, what does it grow from? The roots. And the roots represent our beliefs. Right? This is where you got to dig. You got to find out what's going on. You don't just know what somebody believes. You got to ask questions. You got to have a conversation. You got to, you got to transfer information. Or you have to observe them long enough. Because what you believe will manifest in how you behave. Right? Because your beliefs drive your behaviors. If you believe that you need Coca-Cola, what are you going to do? You're going to drink Coca-Cola. But do you need Coca-Cola? Sure. You might want it, but you don't need it. Everything you need to be healthy was in the first 7 days of this Earth's history. And Coca-Cola was not in the first 7 days of this Earth's history. Right? So, yes, you don't need Coca-Cola. Now, it has some things that you need. Somebody's going to be like, oh boy, he's really stepping on things. Coca-Cola has something you need? Yes, most of it is water. And you need water. And it's got sugar. And guess what? You need sugar. Just not in that form. And then it's got some other stuff that you don't need. So yes, you can live longer on Coca-Cola than you did on nothing. Right? It'll keep you alive longer than if you just don't eat and drink and so on. But it'll eventually kill you. Right? It'll eventually kill you. So, is it important what you believe? Yes. Is it important that your beliefs match your needs? Yes. Because then your behaviors are going to supply what you need, and then you can end up with good fruit and good leaves. But if what you believe does not match what you need, then your behaviors are not going to supply what you need, and then it's going to be chaos. Right? But if you have a tree that has bad fruit and bad leaves, what do you fix? Oh, you don't even fix the tree. You fix the soil. Because the problem with the tree is not the tree. The problem with the tree is the soil. It's its source, right? So sources can either have too little, too much, or the wrong stuff, or just right. Right? Like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? Right? So you can have too little water, and that tree is going to die. You can have too much water, and that tree is going to die. And you can have too much gasoline or diesel. That tree is going to die. Right? So you need a source that is good, that has what you need, and you need beliefs that match with your needs. Then your behaviors will supply what you need, and then you can end up with good fruit and good leaves. Sound like a good plan? Yeah. What else do you need? You need oxygen, you need water, you need food. Anybody here need love? No. No? Anybody here not need love? All right. Good, we're still at 100%. All right. So is it possible that love is just like the other needs, like oxygen, water, and food, and that, like anything else, what you need comes from where? What you need comes from inside of you or outside of you? Outside of you. And if it stays outside of you, what happens? You die. And you only live if you bring it in. But who is it that must bring it in? Yourself. So does love come from inside of you or outside of you? Outside. And what if it stays outside of you? You're going to die. And who is it that must bring it in? Yourself. Right? All right. So you need oxygen, so you breathe. You need water, so you drink. You need food, so you eat. You need love, so you... What? Give? Okay. All right. So you need oxygen, so you breathe out. You need water, so you water out. You need food, so you food out. Is that how it works? No. If you need oxygen, what do you have to do? You have to breathe in. You have to inspire. Not expire or perspire or, right? So, no, every audience I go to, I don't care what part of the world I go to, everybody gets that wrong. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. Somebody in every audience gets that wrong. You need love, so you give love. Really? Is that how it works? Is that how any other need works? No. Every other need, if you need it, you have to bring it in. What if you didn't have any of it? You can't give it. So if you have to give it in order to get it, and you don't got it, you're going to get it. Right? It's a cycle. It'll kill you. Right? It'll kill you. No, it doesn't work that way. So you need oxygen, so you breathe. You need water, so you drink. You need food, so you eat. You need love, so you... What do you do to bring the love in? Oh. All right, so let's say you were having a really bad day and you came home and you stopped at the post and there was a letter besides all the bills that were there. And the letter had your name on it and it was handwritten and it was from the right person. And you, oh, it's good. And you open it up and and it's, oh dear, and it has your name on there. I've been thinking about you for a long time and I can't get you off my mind and thinking about the last time we were together and looking forward to when we can be together again and all sorts of other mushy stuff in between. Signed love, their name, XOXO, heart, heart. How do you feel? Oh, you feel loved, right? You feel loved. So how much love was in the paper? None. How much love was in the ink? No. Where was the love? Oh, the words. The words. The words. Oh. Uh-huh. Yeah, if you didn't take it into your mind, then it wouldn't feed you. Right? You couldn't eat off of it. You're right. You're absolutely correct. So what did you do? Where was the love? And how did you get it? You know what the paper contains? Information. It contains information. Physical things, you can put information in something that is physical. And the physical thing can store that information, like pen on paper, and that can be transmitted. So physical things can contain information and can transport information, but guess what physical things cannot do to information? Originate information. Physical things cannot originate information. So where does information come from? Oh, it came from the mind of another person. Right? It came from the mind of another person. And from the mind of the other person through their nervous system to their muscles attached to their bones, and now a pen, and then having some paper. They put the information on the paper, and then the paper is sent to you, and now you get the paper and you get to extract the information. And you have been taught that this means this letter, and that means that word, and this word has this meaning, and that word has that meaning, and that has that meaning, and you extract meaning from the words that are there. And you understand that it means that that person loves you, and you believe it. You believe it. And now it becomes yours. Now it becomes yours. So, you need oxygen so you breathe, you need water so you drink, you need food so you eat, you need love so you think. It's a process of thought. It's a process of taking information, evaluating the information, understanding what that information means, and then accepting it for yourself, believing it. Now it becomes yours. Right? Now it becomes yours. Now, what if you believe that people can be the source of the love that you need? Oh, they can let you down. Let me ask you this. Can they not let you down? No. They are destined to let you down. Destined to. Because something that needs the same things that you need cannot be the source of what you need. Something that has the same needs that you need cannot be the source of what you need. If you take that tree and you uproot its roots and you put it in a second tree, and you take the second tree's roots and you uproot them and you put them in a third tree, and you take the third tree's roots and you put them in a fourth tree, and you keep doing that with all of the roots of all of the trees, and now all of the trees have their roots in other trees, what's going to happen with all the trees? They're going to die. Without a choice, they will die, because no tree can be the source of another tree, because every tree has the same needs. So what happens if you have your roots in another person, and that person has their roots in another person, and that person has their roots in another person, and then you have multiple people with their roots and other people's roots and other people with their roots, and we're all root bound? What's going to happen to all of us? We're going to evolve into something better. No, we're going to die. Right? We're going to die. So there has to be a source of what we need. And it has to be what we need, exactly what we need, and it cannot be human. It cannot be human. Okay. Oh, okay. So everything that functions is governed by law, and every law that governs function is unchangeable. Like gravity and thermodynamics and laws of motion and, other things like that. And proper function is only maintained by remaining within the law, and dysfunction is a result of going outside of the law. And when we consider law, we need to consider the fundamental law. And most people are unaware of this one. But there is a fundamental law of all nature, and that fundamental law has two components. One is that nothing exists or functions from itself, and the next is that nothing exists or functions for itself. So that means that everything in nature must have power, resources, materials from outside of itself in order for it to exist, if it functions, for it to function, and if it's a living thing, for it to live. And it must continue to have that supply of power, materials, and resources in order for it to continue to function and continue to live. But nothing exists for itself. Everything will take what it gets and then pass it along so that something else benefits from it. And it doesn't have to be some living thing. Inanimate objects will do this. You take a rock in the desert. And guess what it will do during the daytime from the sun? It will absorb the heat. It will take. And a little lizard that might be fried to death in the desert during the daytime, it sits under the rock and it goes, because it's cool down here while the rock is warming up and warming up and warming up and warming up. And then by the time it's starting to get too warm, the sun goes down. And now, what does the rock do? It starts giving heat and giving heat. And everything gets cold around, and the lizard sits under that rock, and it goes, oh, nice and warm, nice and warm, nice and warm, until the next day, and it got cooler, and now the hot, So even the rock is taking and giving, and the lizard is benefiting from it. So everything in creation takes in order to give. And this is the fundamental law of all creation, and that is that everything in creation takes in order to give, takes to give. And so from this, we have thermodynamics that tells us that all energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside of the system. And cause and effect comes from this as well, because every effect must have a cause. The power, material, and resources came from outside of the effect. And then every cause produces an effect. And this is the law of life. It is taking to give. And everything functions according to this law of taking to give. And because that's the case, and everything functions by law, then if I treat the symptoms, but I don't get to the cause, then by law, the cause must produce side effects in order to show that it's still there. Right? So if you treat the effect, but you don't remove the cause, then the cause must reveal itself either by reproducing what it produced in the first place. In other words, your treatment didn't work, it came back. Or by producing a side effect by law. Right? We just think it's, whatever. No, it's by law that happens. Side effects are by law. And some people think, oh, well, yeah, medications have side effects, but praise God, herbs don't. If the herb is not treating the cause, then it will produce side effects as well. And I have seen it plenty of times, right? I've seen it plenty of times. All right, so in order to have health, you need to remain within the law. And of course, there's upper limits for oxygen and lower limits. There's upper limits for water and lower limits. There's upper limits for food and lower limits for food. And, sodium and potassium and chloride and all the different nutrients and so on. There's upper limits for warmth and there's lower limits for warmth. And when you get outside of it, you start having symptoms. It's like the rumble strips on the side of the road going, telling you, all right, you're getting off the road. But if you don't stop there, you get to disease. And if you don't stop there, well, you're eventually going to die. And you get outside of the law and you start to have dysfunction. And the farther you go, the more dysfunction that you have. And it's uncomfortable. And the more discomfort that you have, the farther that you go. And you only have proper function and comfort when you're on the road. And so health is proper function, which is the effect of staying within the law. And disease is dysfunction, which is the effect of going outside of the law. And the symptoms and disease, they're the fire alarm. They're the rumble strips. They're there to let you know something's wrong. They're on the good side of the equation. Now, it's not good that you've got it, but it's good that you can have it to let you know something's wrong so you can look for what? The cause. So you can go look for the cause. Why are you looking for the cause? Because the law of cause and effect, that every effect must have a cause, and every cause must produce an effect. And if the effect is present and it's a process, then the cause is also present. Right? Now, you can have effects that are not processes, right? Like cut off your arm and it doesn't grow back, right? And that could, if things are taken care of well enough and so on, then that can heal over. And guess what? You don't have an arm anymore. But not having an arm anymore is not a process, right? So yes, you can have that effect permanently, but if it's a process, then as long as the process continues, the cause has to be there still, because it's driving the continuation of the process. And if the cause is removed, then the effect has to go away or has to begin going away, like in Michelle's case. When you remove the cause, then the cancer started going away. It took a while for the cancer to grow, so it can take a while for the cancer to go. But it should begin going when the cause is removed, right? And no effect can produce itself because it depends upon power and materials outside of itself in order to function. So, we got to recognize these things and, understand it. And so you will never find an effect without a cause. Never, 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 never. That means there is no such thing as chance. And really, there's nothing that's random. Random is simply our inability to predict what's coming next. Can God predict what's coming next? Yeah, there's nothing random. Right? There's nothing random. It's just our inability to predict. Right? Oh, boy. The curse causeless shall not come. Shall not come. And we also have some quotes from Christ's Object Lessons and Appeal to Mothers. In the laws of God in nature, effect follows cause with unerring certainty. What is unerring? Or who is unerring? God is unerring. Yes, God is without error. So if effect follows cause with unerring certainty, who's in control of the effect? God is. The will of God establishes the connection between cause and its effects. And the effect is there to show us whether the cause is good or not. If the cause is not good, the effect is going to be not good. If the cause is good, the effect is going to be good. So by the effect, you can ascertain whether the cause was good or not. And so the effect is always right because it always shows you correctly whether the cause was right or not. Right? So what is breaking the law called? Okay, I heard it. Yeah, transgression, sin, crime, other things like that. In this context, we're going to call it sin. And when we talk about sin, which law is broken? Yeah, it's the moral law, the Ten Commandments. And what's the foundation of the Ten Commandments of God's law? Oh, it's just what we need. It's love. That's right. So, disease is when the law is broken. Sin is the transgression of the law of love. So, disease is the result of a love problem. Disease is the result of a love problem. I know, I see it. Boy, the first time I heard this, I was squirming in my seat and I was going, oh, this cannot be right. This cannot be right. There is a divinely appointed connection between sin and disease. No physician can practice for a month without seeing this illustrated. If he will be observing and honest, he cannot help acknowledging that sin and disease bear to each other the relationship of cause and effect. Yeah, okay. So here's a cell. Cells are nice. We like them. If you didn't have them, you wouldn't have much. And you and I, as adults, we have 50 to 100 trillion cells in our body. We have over 250 different types of cells. And each type of cell has certain functions that are specific to that type of cell. And every cell kind of functions like a factory, and it produces products. Cell adhesion molecules, cell signaling molecules, autocrines, paracrines, hormones, all sorts of stuff, right, that it produces. And your body is made up of cells. And what your body can do is dependent upon what your individual cells can do and then what they can do together. And if you lose a particular type of cell, then you will lose that particular function that's specific to that type of cell in the body as a whole. For example, if you have somebody that has type 1 diabetes, what cell do they lose? Okay, so that's the product that they lose. It's the beta islet cells, right, in the pancreas. The beta islet cells are killed off. Again, it's another immune thing, autoimmune condition. And so the immune cells kill off the beta islet cells in the pancreas, and those are the only cells in the body that produce insulin. That's right. And so, do you need insulin? Yes, you do. Yes. And somebody who has diabetes and they die from their diabetes, they don't die from high blood sugar. You know what they die from? No fuel in the cells. Because insulin is necessary in order to get the sugar, the glucose, from outside of the cell into the cell at a rate that the cell can survive. And if you don't have the insulin, then you can't get the sugar, the fuel inside the cell, and so it becomes higher and higher in the blood sugar, in the blood. You can measure it, and the sugar levels are high, but it's low, low, low inside the cells, and then the cells die because they don't have the fuel. Right? So insulin is really important. And if you can't make it, you have to take it. And if you can't make it or take it, sorry. Back in the day, before they figured out the whole insulin thing, a type 1 diabetes diagnosis was like one of the worst diagnoses that you could get, because you're going to be dead in hours to a couple weeks. Like, okay, they're going. Now, a cause will immediately produce an effect, but it may take time for the effect to be large enough in order for you to notice it, right? So it can take time for that to happen. And so let's just imagine that you have 20 billion beta islet cells in your pancreas. I don't know how many you have. We're just throwing a number out there. Generally, it's understood that you have to lose about half of a cell population before you start manifesting symptoms associated with that loss. Like half of the liver cells before you start manifesting liver failure, and half of the kidney cells before you start manifesting kidney failure, and so on and so forth. So how many of these cells do you have to lose before you start manifesting the problem? 10 billion. So let's say that right now a process begins, your type 1 diabetes, and your immune system starts killing off 100 beta islet cells every second. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, and so on. Well, you're going to kill off 6,000 in a minute, 360,000 in an hour, 8.6 million in a day, 16.5 million in a week, 260 million in a month, and 3.2 billion cells in a year. It's going to take you 3 years and 2 months at that rate before you actually have symptoms. But the whole time, the cause was in place and the effect was being produced. Right? So in the body, there can be a lag time between cause being in place and effect being big enough to manifest, right? And some disease processes are faster, some are slower, some it might be seconds, minutes, or hours between cause and the effect being seen, and some of it can be years or even decades. Type 2 diabetes, it's typically at least 10 years in the making before somebody actually starts, getting into diabetes, right? But it must be that the cause is in place before the effect is noticed. The cause has to be there before your first symptom. And if the effect, which we're talking about disease, and diseases are a process, if the effect is present, then the cause is also present. And if the cause is removed, then the effect must begin to go away. So this is important when you're looking for the cause, right? So pay attention to the slide. This is a cause slide, looking for the cause. So when I'm dealing with an individual, and let's say, for instance, you started having an autoimmune, you had your first symptoms of your psoriasis, right? You had your first symptoms of your psoriasis 13 years ago, right? First patch on your elbow, right? That was your left elbow, right? and so on. Then you started having one on your right elbow and whatever, and then it started growing from there and getting worse and so on. If 10 years ago, so it started 13 years ago, if 10 years ago you changed your diet, was the diet change the cause? No, because your condition was there 13 years, but your diet change was only there for 10 years. So the cause had to be before your first symptom. Right? So it had to be before the first symptom. And it has to be something that's still there now as long as the disease process continues. So that's what you're looking for. Right? You're looking for something that was there before the first symptom and also something that's still there now. That's what you're looking for. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm dealing with somebody and trying to get to the cause. Okay? Do I know what it is right away? No. Yes. I already know what it is. But by the time we're done with these 3 days, you will too. You will too. So it's not a secret. I'm here to reveal it to you. Right? Now, every living system requires resources and power. It requires fuel and something to get the fuel going. Right? Something to get it going and something to keep it going. And so cells are like that as well. They must have the resources and the power. And according to the law, it's the cell itself that must take the resources and take the power and then not keep it to itself, but to give, right? And so it's got to give something from that. And the fuel, it's the oxygen, it's the water, it's the nutrients, it's chemicals, right? The fuel for the cells is chemicals. And so if you don't have the chemicals, you're not going to have the fuel and the cell's not going to function, right? And every bit of fuel is going to come in through some organ or organ system. And if you need oxygen, that's coming in through the lungs to get into the system. And how many cells of your body need the oxygen? All of them. So how are you getting the oxygen from your lungs to your toes? Oh, it's in the blood. That's right. So the blood is like the semi-truck. It's like the train car carrying the cargo of fuel to all of the different cells of the body so that they can function. And hence the Bible says the life of the flesh is in the blood. The fuel that you need in order to function is going to be taken through the blood. And it's more than that. I mean, you've got living cells in the blood as well, and the bloodstream and whatever. So if you have a problem with your circulation, is that going to cause a problem with your function? Yes. And you may have read perfect health is dependent upon perfect circulation. Right? So circulation is important from that standpoint, from the fuel standpoint. Now, if you have a good level of that or those nutrients or those chemicals, then the cells can take what they need. But if you have too little or you have too much, well, that's going to be problematic. It's going to be problematic. That's the fuel. What about the spark? Where does the spark come from? Get it going. How many cells need to be guided in their function, coordinated in their function? Yeah, all of them, right? So what does the guiding, what does the coordinating, right? Where does the spark come from? Ah, all right. So it has to come from outside of the cell because according to the laws of thermodynamics, all energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside of the system, and the cell is a system. So the power must come from outside of it, and yes, you're right, it's the brain. And the brain gets it to the different parts of the body through the nerves, right? It's like the wires that are sending it. And yes, the cells function as electrical units and chemical units. It's electrochemical function. But here's another question. Where does the brain get the spark? Oh, according to the laws of thermodynamics, it must come from where? Inside the brain or outside the brain? Outside of the brain. Must come from outside of the brain because the power necessary for it to function must come from outside, not from inside. And we're not talking the fuel. The brain already is getting the fuel here through the blood and so on and so forth. That's the spark. Where does the spark come from? It comes from spiritual information, right? Because you and I are not just physical, we're spiritual. And you don't just have organs or organ systems to bring the physical things in that you need. You must have an organ or an organ system that brings in the spiritual things that you need as well. And that's called the spirit. Right? You and I have a spirit, right? Sure. In Genesis 2 and verse 7, the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living being or a living soul. And so the dust, which is pretty simple, became a very complex body. And the breath, which is very simple, becomes a very complex spirit. And the combination of the two is a very complex you. Right? You are a soul. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. But your soul is made up of two components. It's made up of body and spirit. It's made up of physical and spiritual. Right? And that combination is the soul. Right? That's you. It's like a computer. A computer has software and hardware, and if you only had software, you got nothing. And if you only had hardware, nothing's happening. You must have both in order for it to function. And only when the two are together do you have function. But when you bring them together, the software doesn't stop being the software, and the hardware doesn't stop being the hardware, and each have their individual components of the overall function. And similarly, when the spirit and the body come together, the spirit doesn't stop being spirit, and the body doesn't stop being body, and they each have their individual components of the overall function, but they only function when they're together. Separated, no function of body, no function of spirit. And God created man in his own image. Oh, very good. So in creation, which came first? The physical or the spiritual? It's a trick question. And I baited you with a picture. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're thinking Adam and Eve, but at creation, what was the beginning? Who was there before creation? God, and God is spirit. All right. God is spirit. And God said, and it was. And the words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. So the Word made flesh, who dwelt among us, who was the one who spoke in creation, and it came, he said, the words that I speak to you, they are spirit. And he says, God is spirit. So God, who is spirit, spoke spirit, and everything came. So spiritual, or spirit is the beginning, physical is the effect. But science gets that and goes, physical cause, spiritual effect. Right? That's what science does. Because science is based upon evolutionary theory. And evolutionary theory is that nothing blew up, and then everything came from nothing. And unlike any other explosion, things came together instead of flew apart. And then by random processes, matter organized itself and then began to regulate itself. And when it organized itself sufficiently, then it created life. So life is the effect and matter was the cause. And now as it continues to regulate and organize itself over time through random processes, it gets the capacity to think. And so thinking is the effect of matter. And if thinking can become complex enough because of the complex structure of the matter, now you can have morality and judgment and forethought and other things of that nature and whatever, right? That's evolutionary theory. It says that matter is the cause, everything spiritual is the effect. Really? Okay. Then you have some problems. And they'll show up in your life. And they will really show up in your life if that's what you believe. Right? The Bible is clear that God spoke, and it was. And it's the spiritual that began first, and the physical came as a result. So from the spiritual comes everything that's physical, and we are created in God's image. So in us, it's the spiritual that's first, which then impacts the physical, right? So it's not your body that controls your spirit or your mind. It's your mind that controls your body. And we see a lot of that backwards nowadays, don't we? Yeah, the gut-brain connection. What is that? That's the gut controlling the mind. No, backwards. Backwards. What is it that controls the gut? The mind. The mind. Yep. Yes, are there different bacteria that are there? Are there different microorganisms that are there? Yes, absolutely. Sure. And does that have an effect? Yes, it does. And does the diet that you have an effect on all of that? Yes, it does. But where did your diet come from? Your mind. Came from your mind. So, spiritual information is taken in by the Spirit. It's made available to the cortex. And you know, when from your science classes, at least you should, unless you failed that test, that power, when it goes from one form or one medium to the next, it changes its form. But it doesn't change the fact that it's power. It can go from potential energy with a ball on the top of the hill, or a bowling ball on the top of the hill, and then as it rolls down, it picks up more and more kinetic energy. It has less and less potential, but more and more kinetic, and then boom, it smashes into something, and then you have it turns into heat energy, and then it turns into sound waves, and it turns into, and all these different things, but you never lose the power. And so the spiritual information, the power that is there, is not the word. Is the word of God powerful? Does it have power in and of itself? I mean, God's word, is it not creative? Yeah, and it's information. It's spiritual information. God's word is its power. And the word is the food for the mind. Its information is the food for the mind. And it is power. And when that's made available then to the physical structure of the brain, then it generates the electrical activity that you and I can measure on an EEG. And now we can study all the rest of the physical effects of that happens throughout the body. And it goes through the nerves to the different cells of the body and helps to control or regulate them. And it's the soul, which is a combination of the body and the spirit, that can think. The spirit does not think itself. The brain cannot think. The brain cannot think, right? Chemicals don't have the capacity to think. It's the brain and the spirit together. That does the thinking, right? And yes, the spirit must have the brain in order to think. Without the brain, it's like trying to have a computer without hardware. Not going to happen, right? And if you put a bullet through the hardware, is it going to affect the thinking? You betcha. Yeah. But if the spirit has a virus, let's put it that way, like a computer operating system, if the spirit has a virus, is that going to affect the thinking too? Yes. So you can mess up the thinking from a physical standpoint, or you can mess up the thinking from a spiritual standpoint. Both can do it, right? Because you have to have both components in order to be able to think, right? So God said, let us make man in our image, and God is the God of truth. So what kind of information were we created to feed on? Truth. That's right. So when truth is the information that the spirit takes in and makes available to the body, by the way, truth is information that puts things in the right order so that it works. Error is information that puts it in the wrong order so it doesn't work. Right? So truth puts it in the right order so it works. Error puts it in the wrong order so it doesn't work. Still information, but just the wrong order. So when it's truth, through the spirit, through the nervous system, and its control of the different parts of the body, you can end up with proper function because the mind has the right information, has the right food. As long as the fuel is doing well as well. Right? So you got to have the fuel too. Right? But what if it's lies or error that the spirit is taking in and making available to the cortex of the brain and then through the nervous system, through all of that different way? What's going to happen? Dysfunction. Dysfunction in the body through this pathway, even if you have good fuel. You can be eating a vegan diet for 20 years. You can be exercising 5 days a week. You can be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. You can be going to church every weekend and prayer reading in the middle of the week. You can be doing all these wonderful things and look like the best health ministries director. But if this fuel is wrong, oh yeah, there's going to be dysfunction. It'll come, right? It'll come. Now, does anybody ever take in lies or error thinking that it's lies or error? No. 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 You only take in lies and error believing that it's truth. Truth. Right? So, is there any blame for an individual who destroys their body through the lies and the error that they believe? No. There's no blame. None whatsoever. Right? None. So there's no pointing a finger, there's no blame, there's no anything of that nature. But I'll tell you this, we're crazy. And we're going to find out a little bit more how crazy we are. Right? But we're not crazy because we want to be. We're crazy because we can't help it. Right? We can't help it. And the question is, how are we crazy? And the answer is, we'll get to that later. All right, so there are 5 different ways that the body can dysfunction, or the individual can dysfunction. One is inheritance, right? So you've got genetic material. It came to you when you were 1 cell, right? Half from mom, half from dad, 1 cell. How many cells of your body came from that 1 cell?
50%. 50%.
All right, well, 50 from sperm, 50 from egg, and then that becomes 1 cell. So how many of the cells come from that 1 cell? All of them. So if you have a broken blueprint, how many cells are going to have the broken blueprint? All of them. That's right, all of them. So if it's an inherited issue, then it's going to be throughout all of the body, right? You're going to find the broken blueprint there, but not every cell uses every part of the blueprint, right? Only certain cells use certain parts of the blueprint. So if it's a broken blueprint of the hemoglobin molecule and an individual has sickle cell disease, where are you going to find the problem? Only in what cell? In your red blood cells. It's only going to be in your red blood cells because only your red blood cells make hemoglobin and use hemoglobin. So that's the only place that you're going to find the problem, even though the problem is the broken blueprint is in every cell of the body, but all the other cells don't use that part of the blueprint. But how many red blood cells are going to have the problem? All of them. All of them. It's not one here, one there, one there. It's all of them. If it's inheritance, it must show up in all cells of a particular type. All of them. What happens if you develop colon cancer in one part of your colon, then it starts growing from there and getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Is that inheritance? No. No. Because you have other cells that are of the same type that didn't have the problem. Cannot be inheritance. Right? If you have arthritis in some of your joints, is that inheritance? No. Because if it's inheritance, it's going to be in all cells of a particular type, and they're going to be in your joints, right? So if it's a localized problem in a particular type of tissue, it cannot be inheritance that's the cause. Cannot be, right? But there are inheritance issues, like sickle cell anemia, right? And let me skip all that, because I already said it. You can have dysfunction because of environment, because the cells need to have a certain temperature or pressure in order to exist and function. And if you exceed that temperature or that pressure by burning or smashing or cutting, or you freeze or you vacuum injury or other things like that, well, you can have dysfunction, and trauma can be localized. You can knock off one finger and all the other fingers are okay, right? So you can have localized dysfunction with trauma, but trauma is interesting because trauma never creates a new process. It only disrupts an existing process because it damages the structure, and since the structure is needed for the function, it messes up the function. But trauma does not create a new function, right? So trauma can be localized, but it does not create a new function or a new process. It just damages existing processes. All right, now you can have chemicals. And with chemicals, you can have too little of what you need, you can have too much of what you need, or you can have a poison that's there, or venomation, or other things of that nature, and it's not what the cell needs. And with chemicals, chemicals can disrupt or stop an existing process, leading to dysfunction. But chemicals don't ever create a new process. They can be used as a part of a process, and if you don't have them or you have the wrong ones, it can disrupt an existing process, but it doesn't create a new one, right? So, what's this? Well, you don't exactly know. Yes, that's the right guess because I'm trying to indicate that this is gout. Could be pseudo gout, right? But okay, we're going to call this gout, all right? And in that toe, it's called podagra when it's in that joint, the first metatarsal phalangeal joint. And in this individual, it happens to be on the left foot. Guess what they don't have on the right foot? Gout. What's the cause? What's the cause of the uric acid? I mean, what's the cause of the gout?
Cancer.
Yeah, it's not cancer.
No.
Yeah, uric acid. That's uric acid. And you can go there and you can draw fluid out of the joint and you can study it under the microscope and you can see how it refracts and you can test it and you see that it's uric acid crystals that are in that joint. But if I want to know whether that's gout, am I going to send you to the lab and have them draw blood from your toe? No, what am I going to have? Where are they going to draw blood from? From your arm, but the problem's in your toe. How come I'm getting blood from your arm when the problem's in your toe? How do I know what's going on in your toe if I'm getting it from your arm? Because the blood's the same wherever it goes, essentially. I mean, you know, you got more oxygen on the arterial side and systemic arterial side, and you have more oxygen. Yes, anyways, on the systemic arterial side, and you have more carbon dioxide on the systemic venous side, and so on. So there's some, there's some differences from one place to another, but in general, it's the same stuff. I don't have to get it from your left hand because it was in your left foot. I can get it from your right hand. If I really didn't like you, I could get it from your neck. I could get it under your subclavian. I could get it from your femoral. I could get, from all different places, and I could still figure out how much uric acid you have in your system. And yes, we can give you medication like allopurinol to decrease your uric acid levels, and when it goes down low enough, you don't have gout anymore. Well, we fixed the problem. Or did we? Or did we? Now here, what's this? Okay, so you have atherosclerosis, right? And what's in here? Yeah, no, that's not a blood clot. Well, yeah, there's oftentimes, although it could be a soft plaque, but oftentimes it does have calcification associated with it. What's the main component in here? Fat. What usual type of fat?
Oil.
Cholesterol. Right? Right. And so actually low density. Low density lipoprotein usually ends up there. And anyway, so then what do? Well, then we should reduce the cholesterol levels of an individual, and if we can get them low enough, then you could potentially turn the plaque around. From the last time I checked in the literature, not a single study showed that medication could do it. Now, there was one study that showed a 1% reduction in plaque in the carotid arteries with ultrasound. hello. You cannot differentiate a 1% difference with ultrasound in a carotid artery plaque. No. Now, but there are a couple of programs that have shown reversal, significant reversal, and that's the heart disease reversal program with Caldwell Esselstyn at Cleveland Clinic and Dean Ornish's program at UC Davis and so on. So there are some that can reverse that, and it's whole food plant-based diet, exercise, stress reduction. Right. Anyways, so, okay, so we say that that's cholesterol. All right, well, then we should reduce it. And this individual has, let's say that it's a left-sided breast cancer. And so maybe they had too much animal proteins because your processed red meats, you know, salami, bratwurst, and hot dogs and other things like that are class 1A carcinogens. So maybe they ate too much of that during their lifetime, and now they have the cancer. Well, what's the problem with all of those issues, of those chemical causes? Well, it's an old-fashioned law, and that is a diffusion. Because once you get into a liquid environment like that, and you have a substance that can dissolve in that liquid environment, doesn't it go from high concentration to low concentration and eventually even out? Yeah, and it goes even faster when you stir it. How much stirring is happening in the cardiovascular system? A lot. And the higher the heat, the faster it goes. And it's pretty hot in there. And you're mixing it, and it goes pretty fast. And so how much uric acid was going to the left foot as to going to the right foot? The same. But the problem's in the left foot, not the right one. Did the uric acid say, hey guys, we're going to have a party in the left great toe, the first metatarsal phalangeal joint of the left foot, 3 o'clock this night? Okay, so yeah, all right, great, you're thinking, right? So a possibility is trauma, right? Because trauma can be localized. So you can have a localized trauma to that area, and now you have a dysfunction associated with it. But we still have a problem, and I don't expect you to figure that out because you probably haven't had all the biochemical training and and that kind of stuff. But how does trauma concentrate a chemical in a location? Like, you want to pull all the water in the pool to the deep end, and so you slap it really hard, and now it all comes over there? Whoo. Is that how chemicals work? No. No. So we still have a problem. All right, how much cholesterol was here versus here versus here? The same, but the problem's here. If it was the cholesterol, it should look like this. That is a natural process of accumulation in a tube with flow and crystallization. It should look like that. That's not what it looks like. It looks like this. So there has to be something else that we're not considering, right? And then, of course, well, then we consider trauma again, right? So there's flow dynamics and so on, and so you have damage to the endothelium, the inside lining of the artery, and so then you end up having trauma that's in that area, and then because of trauma, there's inflammation, and then your white blood cells get there, and then they accumulate, and then they die, and then they leave the cholesterol behind, and the plaque continues to develop. Have you ever cut yourself? Yes. Yeah. How long did you bleed for? You still bleeding now? No? Decades later? No? How long does it take for an artery to heal? Yeah, pretty quick. Doesn't take very long. If it took a long time, you wouldn't be around. These things heal quick. But this process has been going on for decades or years at least. And we say that's trauma. If you go down the beach and you see that on the beach, what do you think? Now you're going to cry because water's coming up. The tide's coming in. Right? Yeah. Somebody built the sandcastle. Right? Now, did the sand build the sandcastle? No. But can you build a sandcastle without sand? No. So you have to have the sand in order to build the sandcastle, but the sand doesn't do the building of the sandcastle. Right? So how much of that animal protein went to the left breast as it went to the right breast? The same. But the problem's in the left side. Why is it in the left side if the same concentration went to the right side as well? Okay, so maybe there's a trauma, but again, trauma does not create a new process. It only disrupts the existing process. Right. All right, so chemicals can cause dysfunction in a certain type of cell first. So if you're out of, if you run out of iodine, let's use that one, that's easy. If you run out of iodine, what's going to get hit first? Thyroid, because the thyroid uses iodine the fastest. But if you run out of iodine, how much of the thyroid is going to be affected? All of it. It's not going to be a nodule here and a nodule there and so on. It's going to be the whole thing, right? So it should be relatively even across that type of cell, just like inheritance, not parts of it here, parts of it there, and so on. And chemicals can be used as a part of a disease process as a cofactor, just like you must have sand in order to build a sandcastle. But when you remove the cofactor, the chemical or the disease process doesn't manifest. You just wash the sandcastle away, right? You washed it away. But the chemical is not the cause because it can't create a process. It can only be used as a part of the process. So, what are we left with now? The mind. Oh, and what can the mind do? So much. So much. It can do so much. Yes, send the wrong information to the cells, right? Because your mind is, it's amazing. Because every place in your body has a spot in the brain, right? So there's a connection going between the brain to every different part of your body. So if you're playing somebody else is playing pin the tail on the donkey and you were the one blindfolded and they pinned you, you know where they pinned you. You don't have to watch it. You can feel it because you've got nerve endings going to various different parts of the body, right? And everything is controlled and regulated in a very specific way. You control your toes from your upper inner portion of your cortex. And you control your tongue from the outer lateral aspect of your cortex. And, and everybody is regulated that way for the most part, except for, certain defects that happen in development potentially. So guess what you have going to that left great toe? You have a nerve ending going to that toe. And the only thing in the body that can concentrate chemicals is a living cell. It's a living cell. Because a living cell has a selectively permeable membrane and it can push things against the concentration gradient. And so now, under the influence of that signal, the living cells in that area can get uric acid and spit it off into that joint until it super concentrates and now it crystallizes and now you've got gout. And what do you have in that area of the artery? You have a nerve ending in that area of the artery, and that nerve ending can be sending a signal that is picked up by the immune system because the nervous system is the controller of the immune system. And and then those cells, in the context of high cholesterol levels or certain types of cholesterol, then you have this process of plaque development, and it develops here. And then then you end up having your heart attack or whatever. And your tumor, guess what? You got a nerve ending going to the center of the tumor. And the research shows you cut the nerve ending that goes to the tumor, it changes how the tumor behaves. Changes how the tumor behaves. It's quite interesting. And in fact, there was a nice review article that came out, I think it was the beginning of 2018, that showed every step in cancer process, all the way from initiation, all the way through metastasis, and that the nervous system is involved every step along the way. It's involved. So the mind can control processes, it can start them, stop them, increase them, decrease them. It can regulate all homeostatic mechanisms like your heart rate, blood pressure, fluid volume, electrolyte levels, pH balance, and so on. And its effects can be generalized, like the fight or flight response, big dog chasing you, all of your physiology changes like that. Or it can be very localized, that toe. And it controls the immune system and function. So the mind really is the primary controller of inflammation. And it's the primary controller of cell, tissue, organ, and organ system function. And about 90% of the time, The dysfunction that's happening in the body is going to be the result of the mind. So yes, there's inheritance. Yes, there's environment. Yes, there are chemicals, but the mind is the big daddy. It's the big daddy. But we don't usually recognize it. Right? We're not looking for it. We're not taught that. Right? So since cause and effect says every effect has a cause and cause produces an effect, and the laws of thermodynamics say that all energy necessary for your system to function must come from outside of that system, therefore, the cause can never be found where the effect is. The cause can never be found where the effect is. So if you want to know why you have your cancer, you can never answer that by looking at the cancer. Because that's the only place you can look and guarantee you will not find the answer. Because the answer of why can never come in the thing itself. The answer for why can only come from outside. Because the cause had to come from outside of where the effect is. And for the final cause of dysfunction, we have the enemy, like in the case of Job, boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. It was the enemy that did that. But guess what? My guess is that if he came to my emergency department, I know what I would do. I would IND one of those abscesses. I would culture it, swab it for, aerobic and anaerobic bacteria, and I'd be sending it off to the lab, and I'd be putting on a broad spectrum antibiotic in the meantime while I'm waiting for the culture and sensitivity to come back so I can put them on the specific antibiotics that are needed for the bacteria. But I bet you it wouldn't work because the cause wasn't the bacteria. Yeah, the bacteria were there, but the cause wasn't the bacteria. It was the enemy. And until that great controversy issue was over, no treatment would have fixed it. Right? So these are things that we get to consider as we look at the mind and its impact upon the body. And we're going to take, somebody is going to sing. I don't know who that is. And then we're going to take a short break. And then we're going to come back and we're going to find out how psychotic we really are.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mike, for your talk. It's very interesting. I've had many cheers and sorrows, questions about tomorrows. There've been times I didn't know right from wrong. But in those lonely hours, yes, those precious lonely hours, my Jesus came and made me his very own. I've been through a lot of places, and I've seen millions of faces, but there've been times I felt so all alone. And in those lonely hours, yes, those precious lonely hours, my Jesus came and made me his very own.